Hello and welcome to the local campaign. I'm Roger Peterson from City News. On October 19th, Canada will elect the 42nd Parliament, and Rogers TV is the only station producing debates in all of Toronto's 25 ridings. For the next hour, you'll hear from the candidates of Eglinton, Lawrence. Now, 2015 marks the beginning of electoral riding redistribution, so boundaries in the majority of the ridings have changed along with some of the names. So before I introduce the candidates, let's take a closer look at the newly redrawn riding of Eglinton, Lawrence.
The riding of Eglinton, Lawrence stretches from Yonge Street in the east to the CP rail line just west of Caledonia Road to the west, and from Highway 401 in the north to Eglinton Avenue in the south. Yorkdale Mall is the riding's largest recognizable landmark. The Columbus Centre on Lawrence Avenue West, Baycrest Health Sciences Centre off Bathurst Street, and the Toronto Cricket Skating and Curling Club on Wilson Avenue are also located here. As for neighborhoods, Lawrence Heights, Bedford Park, Lawrence Park, and the northern portion of Forest Hill are all in this riding. The incumbent MP for Eglinton Lawrence is Conservative Party member Joe Oliver.
We've had a chance to look at it. I'll introduce the four candidates who have joined us today. Joe Oliver with the Conservatives, Andrew Thomson of the NDP, Marco Mendicino of the Liberals, and Rudy Brunell Solomonovici of the Animal Alliance Environment, the Voters' Party of Canada. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. And we're going to start off now with our opening statements. You'll get 1 minute each, and we will begin by starting in the order of those with the most seats in the House of Commons. So, Joe, we'll start with you.
Thank you very much. I'm so proud to have represented Eglinton Lawrence for the past 4 years and to have generated and advocated for significant investments in the area, including $42 million for Baycrest New Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation, as well as $2.6 billion for SmartTrack. This election is fundamentally about two things: the economy and security. In this turbulent global environment, it's very important that we protect the economy, that we keep taxes low, and that we balance the budget. What we don't need is the Liberal plan to raise taxes and bring us into huge and massive deficits. It's also important that we protect Canadian citizens. After all, that's the government's primary responsibility. We have to strengthen our securities, intelligence agencies, and stay in the alliance to degrade ISIL, something which the Liberals and the NDP would have us withdraw from.
Okay, Joe, thank you very much. That's Joe Oliver, the Conservative candidate. Andrew Thomson now of the NDP. Andrew.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here today and to represent the NDP in Eglinton Lawrence. This election is about change. This election is about confronting the 10 lost years under the Conservatives, 10 years when we have seen more and more seniors retire into poverty, where we see families continue to struggle to find appropriate childcare and affordable childcare, where we still see too many young people without work and without an opportunity to get good work. The last 10 years under the Conservatives have been lost years. This election is about change. Tom Mulcair and I believe that the type of change we need is sustainable, that is focused on families, that is focused on creating jobs in our economy, especially here in Ontario. And it's also about making sure no one is left behind. We need to make sure that we are investing not just in the projects and infrastructure Toronto needs, but also in the people and the programs that are at the core of those. This is where we, as the NDP, differ from both the Conservatives on the right and the Liberals also on the right.
Andrew, thank you very much. And Marco Mendicino of the Liberals. Marco.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Marco Mendicino, and I'm running for the federal Liberal candidacy here in Eglinton Lawrence. I live in the riding. I live here with my incredible wife and my 2 young girls, where they go to public school. I am deeply invested in this riding. My life is here. I volunteer at the board of directors at the Child Care Centre where my children go to school. I also coach them at North Toronto Soccer, which many of you will be familiar with. These voters are not just names to me. They're my friends, they're my relatives, and they are people who matter a lot to me. What this election is about change. After 9 years, 2 recessions, lots of unemployment, people are feeling it at the doors, and this is what I'm hearing about. Our plan is going to kickstart the economy. And that is why I'm running. I'm running because I care about this community. No one will fight harder for it. And I look forward to earning the privilege to be your Member of Parliament.
Thank you very much, Marco Mendicino of the Liberals, and now Rudy Brunell, Solomonovici of the Animal Alliance Environment Voters Party of Canada.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I have a long history of involvement with environmental and animal welfare issues. The Animal Alliance Environment Voters Party stands for a human progress that is just, equitable, and sustainable. Science has shown us that we are intricately linked with the other forms of life on Earth, the animals and the plants, and we cannot survive without them. Science and history and also common sense should tell us that if we keep on exploiting our resources the way we have been infinitely in a finite world, that we will see greater epidemics, health epidemics, and catastrophes of the type we've already experienced in this century.
Okay, Rudy, thank you very much. And I should make note that there are two other registered candidates who are not here today, and they are Matthew Chisholm of the Green Party and Ethan Buchman of the Libertarian Party. So we will now begin our question and answer period of the debate. Each candidate will be given 30 seconds to respond, followed by discussion. And the first question is well, Joe, we'll start with you, and then we'll rotate through as we go through the questions. But the first question is, the current government has placed great importance on trade deals with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the European Union. When it comes to international trade, what should Canada's priorities be, Joe?
Well, we're great believers in international trade. When we arrived in 2006 to form government, there were only 5 trade deals. Now there are 39 additional ones, including the EU arrangement. The Trans-Pacific deal will be very important. 800 million people, 40% of GDP, $27 trillion. We believe this will create jobs and growth for Canada, and we're very supportive.
Okay, Joe. Andrew Thomson.
The trade deals that the Conservatives have entered into to date have been important in terms of providing more opportunities, especially in the U.S., opening up the access to markets. But they have to be tempered to make sure that we protect Canadian interests and Canadian jobs. In many cases, this has not been the case. And this is why we're very concerned that as the negotiations are ongoing around the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that the Conservatives should come clean about what they're prepared to sacrifice in the auto sector, what they're prepared to sacrifice in agriculture and food security to simply gain more access to Asian markets. Okay,
Andrew, thank you very much. Marco.
Well, Liberals have a long and positive track record when it comes to free trade. We're very concerned that Mr. Oliver and his government have seemingly broken the caretaker protocol by continuing to negotiate during a writ period. We were also very concerned when we heard Stephen Harper talk about how the manufacturing sector is not going to like the outcome of the trade deal. We're going to stand up for small and medium-sized businesses. They are the backbone of the economy, and we're going to do that by lowering small to medium-sized business taxes from 11% to 9%.
Okay. Rudy.
We believe that trade deals should be fair between us and the countries that we are dealing with, and when we are drawing up the rules for the trade, we should be cognizant of how this is going to affect the sustainability of the world that we are living in.
Okay, Rudy, thank you very much. Now, is there anybody who would like to rebut?
Yes, I would. Firstly, there is a protocol in place when an action is required that is urgent and is in the national interest. We have the right to proceed, and we've consulted with the Privy Council, and we're very comfortable that we have the right to proceed because this is, in fact, an urgent and extremely important issue. Let me be very clear. We will protect supply management. We will protect the auto sector. We will not go ahead with any deal that isn't in Canada's interest, but we believe there's an immense opportunity here, and we see the opportunity to proceed.
I just want to say on this that there's certainly no problem with the Conservatives proceeding with negotiate. I think what they need to do is come clean with the Canadians as to what they are negotiating on. Let's put forward the mandate. The Conservatives do not have a mandate to sign this deal, will not have a mandate to sign this deal unless they come forward during this election and are clear about what's on the table, what's off the table. The Prime Minister has already signaled saying that the auto sector will not be happy. That is very clearly code word for there will be massive job losses. And I think that it is incumbent upon the government, as it's going through the negotiations, to put forward to Canadians what the plan is.
We will submit this deal to Parliament if re-elected.
Marco.
Thank you. Well, I think it's curious coming from the NDP candidate that they're huge proponents of free trade, given their track record on how few free trade agreements they've actually supported in the last parliamentary session. But with respect to what Mr. Oliver said, I'm not sure that Canadians agree that the timing of an election and the imminence of an election meets the threshold of what is in the national interest of the government. So, look, the Liberal record on free trade is clear. We support it and the broad principles. We just think that there is a much more open and transparent way that these deals should be negotiated.
Now, the record is clear. They've opposed NAFTA. They've opposed other deals. They're opposing this deal, but we're determined to go ahead in the Canadian national interest.
Well, Joe, in all fairness, I do think that the Liberal leader, at least under Mr. Trudeau, has always put up his hand every time the Prime Minister's put up his hand. It's like pulling a string. The Prime Minister's hand goes up, Mr. Trudeau's hand goes up on these trade deals, whether he's looked at them or not. And all we're saying is that what we need to see from the NDP side is very clearly what the negotiating parameters are. I think it's in this important time of an election, there's no better time for us to have a conversation about what the future of our economy looks like.
How many free trade deals did Mr. Mulcair actually support in the last parliamentary session, Mr. Thomson? Was it 2?
It was 2, indeed.
That's a stellar record indeed.
And how many did your leader actually read?
I think Mr. Trudeau knows his free trade agreements.
They said very clearly they did not even read the EU agreement and they were prepared to sign on to it.
Would you like to rebut that, Mark?
Well, I think Mr. Trudeau knows his free trade agreements perhaps a little bit better than Mr. Thomson knows his costing model.
Rudy, would you like to join in?
Not at this moment. Thank you.
Shall we move on to the next question? The national debt stands at $612 billion, and that's just for the federal government. Interest rates alone are consuming 11% of the total federal revenues. The historic rates for interest rates are at historic lows, and the cost will only go up if the rates rise. Should paying down the debt be more of a priority for the government? And Andrew, we'll start with you.
Well, there's an old maxim that says, when you're in a hole, stop digging. And I think that that's good advice for this government. We have seen the Conservatives plunge us $150 billion more into debt. We see the Liberals now saying they'll take us another $30 billion into debt. That $600 billion that Canadians owe on the federal debt has cost us $1 trillion since 1990. That is money that could otherwise have gone to tax cuts. That's money that could have gone to support social programs. Now is not the time to embark on further borrowing. We finally have the federal government out of a deficit. We should maintain that. We should put the money now into social program spending that will support Canadians and Canadian families.
Marco.
Well, look, the former parliamentary budget officer, Kevin Page, looked at the NDP costing framework and likened it to Swiss cheese, which I think is an appropriate metaphor given the huge gaps in that model. On the other hand, you've got Mr. Oliver. No one is better at running deficits than the Conservative government is, and I think it's ironic that Mr. Oliver was muzzled for large tracts of this campaign. He seems to have reemerged only to deny that there was a recession. You can say that you balanced a budget this year, Joe, but I think Canadians know how you did it. You did it by selling GM shares to the tune of a $750 million loss. You did it by dipping into a rainy day fund.
We're going to wrap you up here.
And you did it on the backs of veterans, which is very regrettable indeed, and cutting other social
You'll be able
services.
to rebut in just a second.
Sure.
Joe. Rudy.
How much larger can we allow our debt to grow? It's immense now, and it's shocking the way the debt the way it is. That when I remember when I was younger, how small several millions of dollars, and now it's burgeoning into billions and even trillions. More money should be allotted for social welfare programs.
Okay.
We're very proud that last year we balanced the budget, $1.9 billion surplus. This year there's $5.2 billion already in the first 4 months, so we will balance the budget again for the second consecutive year. Balancing a budget is very important because it means that more money can go to social programs, more money can go to investments, less money has to go to interest rates. It means that we can protect our credit rating. It means we won't have the weakness that might otherwise occur if there's an international shock, like a collapse in the price of oil or weak global growth, which is precisely the current situation. And it means that we don't pass on our debt to our children, our grandchildren. No family would want to do that. No country should as well.
I'll stop you there. Now we'll go into rebuttals. Would you like to respond to what Marco was saying? Joe.
Well, I think we're dealing here with facts. I mean, the reason we balanced the budget is because our revenues were greater than our expenses. And the fact is, it's quite remarkable that we're able to do that because we've done it in the context of a dramatic decline in the price of oil and a weak global economy. We also have done it while keeping taxes low. They're at the level they were 50 years ago. We have an unprecedented, longest infrastructure program in the history of Canada, $85 billion. We've increased our transfers to the provinces by 62%. The number for Ontario is 88% more than when we came into office. And we've funded our brave men and women in uniform. We've done all that and balanced the budget, and we're going to balance it again this year.
Andrew, you look like you have something to say.
Well, I will say this, and I will give credit to Mr. Oliver. After 7 tries and $150 billion, they did finally get back into balance. I would argue the priorities that they have used to get us to that point have been wrong. They have been on the backs of ordinary Canadian families and working families, and I think that that's unfortunate. But the real concern I have is that the Liberals have decided to panic as they saw the Chinese markets soften 3 weeks ago, embark on a massive spending spree that they want to rack up $30 billion worth of new debt, initially arguing that this was some kind of stimulus, then pulling back and saying, no, it was going to deal only with critical infrastructure. And now when we look at their document, we find that half of the money that they're building into deficits is not even going to infrastructure at all. So I think that it's important for the Liberals to actually come clean about why they want to continue to plunge the country into more and more debt. With the fact that today, almost all of the GST is necessary just to cover interest costs is a shocking condemnation of the state of the country's finances.
Marco.
Well, I'm not going to be as generous as you were, Andrew, to Joe. Mr. Oliver, you've presided over the worst period of economic growth in 80 years. And the way that you balanced the budget was through a series of accounting tricks and not through growth and actual positive stimulus. Unemployment is back on the rise. It's back up to 7%. We have over 1.5 million Canadians who are on the EI line. Youth unemployment is at 13.1%. You don't have a strategy to turn this economy around. That is what Canadians are telling me at the door. That is what the residents of your own riding are telling me at the door. And if you had been here the last 4 years, if you'd been knocking on those doors and listening to them, you would understand that the statistics that you're trotting out right now just do not square with how ordinary Canadians are experiencing their lives.
I have canvassed continuously. I've knocked on over 40,000 doors. I've loyally served the values and the interests of the people in this riding. I have advanced and advocated for and succeeded in obtaining some very significant investments. I've mentioned the investment in Baycrest, the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation. This deals with the issue of cognitive impairment, which is going to become more serious over time. It's Eglinton Lawrence's gift to Canada, Canada's gift to the world. I mentioned Smart Track. We've also put significant amounts of money into cultural organizations. I've advocated for and succeeded in having the Asprey West United Church receive an enabling accessibility fund. They're right on Bathurst, on Glencairn. Shar Shemaim Synagogue has received a security infrastructure grant. We put $150 million into wastewater treatment projects. I'm working on behalf of my constituents 6,000 constituents have come in and have received services for a variety of important issues. I've helped the Filipino community when they raise money for Typhoon Haiyan. I've done a great deal over the last 4.5 years, and I'd be honored to continue to do that for the next 4 years.
Okay, Marco,
Roger, I'm sorry, that was a very long answer, but the long and the short of it is this.
Well, because I've done a lot.
A series of last-minute announcements on the cusp of an election is very transparent. I'd be very interested to hear what percentage of those dollars were actually doled out. And in relation to how close this election is, I think it's fairly evident that these are nothing more than just goodies that you've offered to people to try and sweeten the vote. And it's very obvious what that's all about.
I'm not surprised that on a question. I'm not surprised that on a question around national finances, that we're seeing both the Tories and the Liberals attempt to change the subject. I mean, understandably, the Conservatives have nothing to be proud of over the last decade. Certainly as it pertains to Canadian families. And I can understand why the Liberals would want to run away from their program, as their leader did for 3 days after announcing their costing. But this is an important issue about what the future of the country looks like, how we get the budget back in balance, how the government lives within its means, and what kind of programs we're prepared to invest in to support Canadian families.
I'm sorry, I
have to take that up. I'm going to answer Mr. Mendicino first.
Let Joe go first and then Marco.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Mr. Mendicino is simply making things up. I have been working for the community for 4.5 years. Many of these things that I referred to, of course, have been long-standing accomplishments, and we'll continue to work on behalf of the people in the city and in this riding. But on the broader issue, on the issue of the economy, the last thing we need in a global environment which is fragile, and I've had witness to that. I've attended many G20 meetings. The last one was in Turkey last month. We're confronting what is now called the new normal, along with instability flowing currently from the decline in the Chinese economy. We have to remain strong. The last thing we need are high taxes and even greater spending, massive deficits, going up to $30 billion a year. This will weaken the economy, it will destroy job creation, and it'll make life less affordable for Canadians, including Canadians living right here in Eglinton Lawrence.
Marco, we'll let you do one
Thank
more
you
response,
very much.
and then we'll move on to the next question.
The announcements with respect to Smart Track and Baycrest were within weeks of the writ dropping, Joe. You can't deny that. And with respect to the deficits, you've been hitting the panic button on your rhetoric. I rely on the likes of David Dodge, who's the former governor of the Bank of Canada, who is not a liberal, who is not stumping for the Liberal Party, but who has said that now is the time to be investing because interest rates are at historic lows. And the question that I pose back to my two opponents on the right are, if not now, then when? Look, what we're solving for, if you live in the city of Toronto, and more importantly, if you live in the riding of Eglinton Lawrence, where you are feeling pressure from the 401, from the downtown commute, and from the Allen Road, is the need to modernize our public transit system. The only way that you can do that is if you invest. And if you invest by putting an underperforming part of the economic sector, the labor force, back to work. You put shovels in the ground, you grow the economy that way, and you have something to show for it, which reflects the fact that we are the 4th largest city in the continent and the largest city in this country.
So how is it then that only half of the money that you're projecting to go into deficit for will actually go to infrastructure? Half. You said initially this was going to be a stimulus program. Where is it?
I'll take Mr. Dodge's opinion about our costing over yours. So
you're projecting a $10 billion deficit.
I think we're going to stop it right here. We'll move on to the next question.
Yeah, I mean, transit is, if you're going to ask a question on transit, if you're not, I'd like to make a comment.
I think we can do that. We can ask, how about we'll ask this next question is, transit within the city. The cities are considered the drivers of the economy now in this country. Transit, we have all kinds of problems with traffic. Transit is one of the big questions at the local level, also probably up at your level, so we'll ask that question. How would they help cities like Toronto with transit and moving people around the cities? And Marco, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you. Our party has earmarked $125 billion in infrastructure spending over the next 10 years, of which nearly $20 billion is going to be specifically allocated to public transit. As I said in the last segment, we live in the largest city in the country. Eglinton Lawrence is situated in the geographic heart of the 416. When I talk to people who live in our riding, They feel it every day. The average commute is about 90 minutes, which is far too long. We want to get people to work. We want to get them home to their families so they can enjoy it. So,
Marco, we'll cut you off there. This is the opening question.
I was just going to wrap up. I was just going to say that of the three parties, we have made the most significant commitment to infrastructure.
Okay. Rudy.
Amazingly, traffic in the city has not gotten much worse, even though our population has greatly increased. So something must be doing right with our traffic infrastructure. And the Eglinton rapid transit line that is being built is a very good thing for our riding, and I'm glad to see that it's proceeding well.
Okay, Rudy, thank you very much. Joe.
Yes, well, thank you. Look, we have the largest and longest infrastructure program in the history of Canada, $85 billion over the next 10 years. And in my budget, I introduced the new transit fund, which will be going up to $1 billion a year and address the issue, which is the biggest urban issue, the question of traffic congestion. I was very proud when the Prime Minister announced $2.6 billion, the first of the designated projects under this transit fund for Smart Track. That's going to relieve congestion on the Yonge and University lines. We've created a permanent gas tax funding for the municipalities, which makes funding predictable. We've put money into the Scarborough subway, the Shepherd light rail subway. We consider this a very important issue, and we put our money down, but we don't want to drive the country into massive deficits. Okay. It's not a question of either or, it's where in the continuum you put the point.
Andrew.
One of the concerns that we have, and I hear all the time around transit, is there's simply too much politics in it. That the city has a plan, it has a projection of how it wants to grow, it now just needs the money to do so. We've seen the Conservative federal government meddle in that plan. We've certainly seen Kathleen Wynne's government meddle in that plan. What we're saying is we want to provide a predictable, steady stream of funding directly to the city to be able to accomplish their transit goals. That'll be $1.6 billion from the NDP during our first term in office to support that in the GTA. I think that that's important, that we recognize there needs to be a new relationship between the federal government and the cities to actually allow them to accomplish their objectives.
Now, I'll throw this into, is there, in the middle of this, the transit TTC, one of the least funded in North America. Mm-hmm. How would you guys help that? How would you help that out? Let's throw that into the pot too, as well as we talk about transit. Sorry, last minute.
Well, the Prime Minister explicitly said a couple of days ago that money would be going to the TTC. I mean, let me just revert back for a second to the question of reliable funding, which I agree with my opponent about. We need steady funding, and that's why we've provided steady funding through the gas tax plan. And the numbers are unprecedented. And we're dealing with this issue, and we're dealing with it in a way that the money will be available when it's needed. The Smart Track is the biggest project, but there are many others. And we will make sure, our government will continue to make sure that we will do what we have been doing, which is to provide money for transit, because we understand how important an issue it is for people and for the economy.
Joe, Marco, the money is not just needed in an election year, and people see right through that. The population of this city is going to double in the next 20 to 30 years. You can't just dole out funds every time you want to get reelected. We are going to invest close to $20 billion over the next 10 years, and those monies are going to funnel right into the likes of the TTC.
But how much will be coming into Toronto? That $20 billion is over the entire
We're going to
country.
what we're going to do is we're going to take calls, unlike Mr. Harper, from the mayor of this city and the premier of this province. We're going to work with the cities, and we're going to work with the provinces, and we're going to listen to their concrete proposals. A project like the Eglinton CRT right now, which has small and medium-sized businesses suffering, should have been completed a long time ago. It didn't get done because there hasn't been good communication between the federal government, and everyone knows that it hasn't been a federal partner now for the last 9 years. Under Justin Trudeau, we're going to see far more cooperation, and you're going to see Justin Trudeau speaking with Mayor Tory. You're going to see Justin Trudeau working with Premier Wynne, so that we can be sure that people shorten their commutes so that they can rely on safe and quick transit to get home.
There's a problem with the Liberal platform, and it's actually exactly the point that Marco makes. It's all based around the election. There's a big injection right after the election, and then it declines. That's not the steady, predictable funding that the city needs. That's not the steady, predictable funding that allows the transit authorities to make good, sound decisions. It is too much the legacy of Toronto's transit system, where we've had these wild swings from one side to the other. What we need is to make sure steady funding, and it increases predictably through things like the gas tax transfer.
Would the NDP doing that?
Indeed, it will be, exactly as the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has asked for.
Let me talk for a second about the question of communication. I met with John Tory, who I knew very well before, on his first week in office, and I've met with him numerous times since, as has the Prime Minister. I've got an excellent relationship with him, as does the Prime Minister. We're working on the priorities for the city. The biggest priority for John Tory was Smart Track, and we've made a very significant commitment in that regard.
How many times did you meet with Premier Wynne? How many times did Mr. Harper meet with Premier Wynne in the last year?
Well, I personally have met many times with my counterpart, Charles Sousa, with whom I have a good relationship, and I've met with numerous other members of the caucus, and I've been at various events that the Premier has attended, but that's not my parallel in government. But I've certainly had a lot of discussions with Charles Sousa. In fact, he and I are working very closely together on the establishment of a cooperative securities regulator. This is a major initiative that Jim Flaherty was advancing. I personally have been advocating for this, a National Securities Commission, for many decades, and I'm pleased to work cooperatively with the province of Ontario.
And if you'd gotten the legislation right on that, Joe, maybe the Supreme Court of Canada wouldn't have struck down the reference the first time.
Okay, at this point, let's move on now to our next question. Unemployment rates in the city above the national norm, if I remember correctly. Jobs are a concern. We're based on manufacturing here. What would you do to bring good jobs into Toronto specifically when it comes to helping the economy move along? And I believe, Rudy, we're starting with you.
Well, obviously the current economic situation has not alleviated poverty in the city. So what we need is a massive rethinking about our economy and how it can help our citizens, and keeping in mind the environmental concerns that our party has, that we do not further degrade our city and the environment of our city by exploiting our resources unnecessarily, and with the proper structure and the proper rethinking of our economy, we can create a sustainable environment to help our citizens and their lifestyle.
Okay, Rudy, thank you very much. Joe.
Well, our government has invested a great deal in alleviating poverty. In fact, there's 180,000 fewer children in poverty than, according to UNESCO, during the recession than there was before. We have made life more affordable for Canadians, Canadian families, all 4 million of them, by introducing various family benefits, including an increase in the universal child care benefit.
We're talking about job creation here in the city. And
yeah, and in terms of job creation, one of the most effective ways, of course, of doing that is to reduce taxes on job-creating businesses. We've brought the tax rate for small business down from about 13.25% to 11%. We're going to bring it down a further quarter point a year to 9%. Small businesses are the biggest generators of employment in the country. Toronto is doing quite well overall, but there are sectors that aren't doing as well as they should. We need to focus on youth employment as well, and we've got a variety of programs for job matching, for approving apprenticeship and student loans that will drive forward the employment, which is one of our critical objectives here. We understand how important it is for individuals and for the economy overall.
Okay. Andrew.
One of the challenges that we've seen has been the Conservative focus on the resource sector to boost GDP growth. Unfortunately, that has largely come at the expense of our manufacturing sector here in Ontario. There have not been the supports put in place to make sure that manufacturing sector grows. We've seen 250,000 jobs lost in manufacturing alone here in Ontario. That obviously has a trickle-down effect into Toronto's economy. What we need to see now are three main things happen. One, the small business tax rate needs to be accelerated in its cut. We need to do that more quickly. It needs to go to from 11 to 10, 10 to 9 within the next 2 years. Small business is creating 80% of the new jobs in this economy today. We also need to get those other big job-creating sectors back on track. We need to invest in supporting business as they retool in manufacturing, in aerospace, in technology, in innovation. These have always been the traditional job growth areas for Toronto and for Ontario, and that's where the focus needs to be. We cannot afford a situation where there are 300,000 more unemployed people in this country as there are today. We can't have 400,000 fewer manufacturing jobs than we did a decade ago.
Andrew?
And frankly, under the Liberals and the Tories,
Andrew,
we've seen 20,000 manufacturing firms go out of business.
Marco, your turn.
Look, I think everybody has a hard time squaring what Mr. Thomson just said with the fact that you're going to be raising corporate taxes from 15 to 17%, and there are economists who have opined that there are going to be at least 150,000 jobs which are going to be exported out of Canada. But the Liberal Party is going to hold the line at 15%, which we think is a responsible rate. We're also going to lower taxes for small to medium-sized businesses. And most importantly, and here's what separates us from my two opponents, we're going to give a tax cut to the vast majority of Canadians who need it. Not just those who are at the wealthiest, super elite, top 1%, but those who are feeling it at the doors. The people that I speak to every day, wherever they live in Eglinton, Lawrence, they are telling me that we have just not seen any improvement in the quality of life, and that is because, Joe, your government has a failed economic record. And under our plan, we're going to turn it around.
There for your answer. Joe, would you like to respond?
Yes, I would. First of all, we have, since the depths of the recession, created 1.3 million net new jobs, 190,000 in the past year. It's a record that other countries
But how many in this area, though? How many in this area in the GTA or Toronto, for example?
Well, hundreds of thousands since that period. But you know, my opponent, my Liberal opponent, talks about keeping taxes down. You know, for small businesses, his leader, Justin Trudeau, says that half of the small business owners are tax cheats. So presumably he's going to increase their taxes, because if you're dealing with tax cheats, which we, of course, a notion which we utterly reject, then presumably that will be his response. The other issue, of course, is that both of my opponents would have us raise payroll taxes dramatically. The Wynne government proposed Ontario pension plan would create a cost for employers and employees of $3.5 billion. If you bring that across the country, we're talking here about over $9 billion, conservatively $9 billion. And the NDP plan is even higher, but that's what the Liberal plan would result in. This would kill jobs. The Manufacturers Association just put out a report a couple of days ago. They said it would reduce salary increases, it would reduce hiring, and it would cause many companies to have to close business. This is not the way to protect the economy, to make life more affordable, or to create jobs.
It's a sad commentary when the Conservative government has to say that they would rather starve out retirement savings than make sure that there's proper investments for people as they age. I think that is just a sad commentary to put that as an economic proposition, Joe, and I categorically reject it. I also find it fascinating that what the Liberals are talking about in their plan, if you listen to my Liberal opponent, is that the only thing they've got built in to create jobs is a tax increase for the top 1%. What that's going to do, I can't imagine, is going to have any impact whatsoever in terms of job growth. Nothing in the for a jobs plan, nothing for manufacturing, nothing for the technology and innovation sectors. All they're going to do is invest in one-time projects, some short-term jobs, and send us all the bill that we'll be paying for a generation yet to come.
Andrew, you're sounding more and more conservative every time I listen to you. Maybe that's why you've got matching ties today. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to correct something very factual. Under a Liberal government, we are going to reduce EI payroll premiums for small to medium-sized businesses, and our plan is the same, 11 to 9%. Let's make that absolutely clear. Under a Liberal government, we're also going to help young families, the people that I speak to in Eglinton, Lawrence, who need additional support for food, for money, for education for their children are going to get additional support through the creation of the Canada Child Benefit Plan, which is a means-tested approach. That is to say that we look at those families who need the support based on their age of their children, based on their family income, and we provide them with a check that, unlike Mr. Oliver's plan, is not subject to then being clawed back through taxation. It's a tax-free check. And when I tell people that, it's like their eyes light up. They understand that they've got hope under our government, and that's why they're supporting our approach.
This answer on jobs is even more nonsensical than what Mr. Trudeau puts forward. Now we're talking about an investment in the child benefit as somehow being job creating. This is, I mean, Mr. Mendicino has not been able to lay out what the Liberal job plan is, because there isn't one. All there is a bunch of deficit borrowing, short-term projects, and sending us the bill. There is nothing else in their plan to create jobs.
Okay. The other thing is he's misrepresenting what the Liberal Party would do on EI. In fact, they wouldn't reduce EI from what we're proposing. They would increase it. They would increase it. We're bringing it down from $1.88 to $1.49. They would bring it to $1.65. We're talking here about a difference of $1,000 every year in additional payroll tax under the Liberals.
We're talking about
imposed upon employees.
Gentlemen, 1 sec. We'll let Joe finish.
This is an additional $1,000 imposed on employees and employers. That's not a reduction. That's an increase. It's a job-killing increase.
Marco, would you like to respond?
Well, he's just absolutely misrepresented the precision of my answer. And with respect to Mr. Thomson, you've got very, very ambitious goals. Very responsible economists have taken a look at your costing framework and have said that they are empty promises, whether it's on childcare, whether it's on your infrastructure. The boldness is matching that of Tommy Douglas, but it's based on Mr. Harper's projected growth over the next few years. Two totally irreconcilable concepts.
So people who have been listening to the debate will have heard clearly on the question of jobs. Where the Conservatives are, they believe in this continuation of cutting taxes, which has not worked over the last decade. They've heard the Liberals say nothing about how they create jobs. What they can see from us is a plan to invest in those core industries that are the strength of Ontario: manufacturing, automotive, aerospace, technology, innovation, in a way that will help them recapitalize, retool, and be more competitive. That is Tom Mulcair and the NDP's plan, and it is far and above better than what the Liberals are offering.
Saying it doesn't make it true, Andrew. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Tell me again then, what is your job plan? We'll give you a fourth try on this, Marco.
Well,
this is your fourth attempt to get it right.
If you'd listened on the first time, all I said was that we were going to invest in infrastructure. Infrastructure is going to create jobs. Now, I don't know what part of that is difficult for you to understand, but instead of balancing budgets and maintaining a conservative rhetoric, we are going to run modest deficits, which have been supported by the likes of David Dodge. And he has, and I'm quoting him here, he said this is a wonderful thing. So maybe you're offside of what Mr. Dodge thinks about how we can create and stimulate the economy and create jobs. As I said before, I think I'll take his opinion over yours.
So of the $10 billion a year that you're looking at plunging the country into debt, you are only proposing $5 billion of that for infrastructure. Tell me again how that job works.
I think you have our answer.
Unfortunately, I think this is indeed the answer.
Okay, we'll move on to our next question. Just a simple one. What is the most pressing issue in this riding, and how would you resolve it as MP? Relative obviously to the federal level, but what is the most pressing issue? And I think, Joe, we're back to you for answering.
Well, I think the most pressing urban issue is
within your riding, too, specifically within your riding.
Well, I think you know, our riding is a microcosm, really, not only of Toronto, but of all of Canada. And people's interests differ quite a bit. But the issue of transit, the issue of traffic congestion is a very important issue for Canadians. But I would say the critical issue for everybody are pocketbook issues. How's the economy going? How's it growing? Are there jobs? How affordable will life be? And that's why our low tax plan for jobs and growth addresses that issue head on.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Just for those opening questions. Andrew.
It depends on what part of the riding you're in. I suspect in fact, we hear this as I'm out in Lawrence Heights, the issues around income inequality, the issues around affordability are significant. On the west side of the riding, there's no doubt that the question of retirement security is very important. As we move into Lawrence Park, the issues around the economic strength of the country are important. All of these things need to move forward at once. This is a very rich country, if we get the priorities right, we can afford to make the changes that people are looking for. That's what we need in terms of a new government.
Marco.
Transit, commutes are too long. I think you hear that right across the riding. Housing, affordable housing in particular. Housing prices are skyrocketing, particularly in Eglinton, Lawrence. But we also have long waiting lists to get into Toronto housing. Those are well documented. I believe close to 90,000 which are now on a waiting list. And our plan is going to address that. Our plan, through infrastructure investing, is going to allocate nearly $20 billion, which is going to be allocated to cities like Toronto, so that we can repair the very poor state of housing in Toronto, and particularly in Eglinton, Lawrence. And I've knocked on those doors. I've been to Lawrence Heights. I don't know if Joe has recently, but they are in a very woeful state. And I don't know how he can trot out any statistics which match with what they're feeling every day. They're suffering. So our plan is focused on those types of priorities. And the last thing I'd say is safety. I think by and large, Canada has become safer, but we can't take it for granted. And as a former federal prosecutor, I'm going to fight very hard to keep our communities safe for our seniors, for our families, and for our children.
Okay, Marco. Rudy.
Transit is a problem in Eglinton, Lawrence riding, but also health is an issue here and everywhere. People need to be informed more about how to stay healthy, how to eat healthy foods, exercise, eat more local plant-based foods that are non-GMO and not heavily processed. Also, poverty has been established as one of the factors that make people sick, not having enough money to look after themselves. So the Animal Alliance Environment voters would like to change the current welfare system we have to have a basic income system where everybody is guaranteed so much money so that they can live comfortably and not fall below this safety net.
Okay, Rudy, thank you very much. Would anybody like to
Well,
rebut
just
on this
one thing, the issue
ahead,
of
Jeff.
safety was raised, and I think everyone would acknowledge that the Conservatives have taken a tough stand against crime. We've put the rights of victims before that of criminals, and we will continue to do that because the very first obligation of any government is to protect its citizens.
Yep, I'd like to respond to that because I have some firsthand experience in the area of law enforcement and keeping our communities safe. There's been a lot of tough talk, Joe, from your government, but you've also made cuts to prosecutors and other frontline law enforcement. It's completely inconsistent. We see that across the board. And when it comes to your track record on passing legislation, one bill after the next has been struck down as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of Canada, wasting taxpayer funds on billions of dollars in jails. That is not an approach that makes a lot of sense to the families that I'm speaking to. And I just think that we need to take a smart on crime approach, not a tough on talk and crime approach, Joe.
Well, the fact is that crime is at its lowest level since 1968. Crime has continued to come down since the 1990s. That's a result of a number of measures. What we need to now invest in are the frontline resources that work at a community level to establish community policing, not carding, community policing. And I think that's an important piece in terms of rebuilding the safety in our communities. That's why we'll put $30 million into Toronto Police Services to support those frontline officers being hired.
Okay, we moved away from the riding itself. We're now in, if you're all okay with it, we'll just stay on
If I can just get one last word.
Safety.
I agree with some of what Andrew just said. But on the topic of overall crime rates, it is true that they are on the decline. Mm-hmm. But in our riding, break-and-enters are actually a real problem.
They are.
And I speak to those neighbors, and those are concerns which are obviously ones that I share. And I'm going to fight for the community to keep it as safe as possible.
Well, that's why we need to put the investment into community policing. And I think we need to do a better job of working with NGOs in our community to make sure that people do have safe communities that are truly connected. Simply relying on systems, as we've seen under Bill Blair's tenure as police chief, have not worked.
Well, you know, I've heard some ambivalence, and we see this a lot from the Liberals. They're always sitting on the fence. It must be uncomfortable. You know, reservations about taking a tough stand against crime, and yet he's in favor of it. I mean, you don't know exactly where he is. He's trying to speak to all sides on this issue, if I might finish. The other issue, of course, relates to international terrorism, and I don't know if you want to have a separate discussion on that, but that's a
we can hold off on that as
okay. Let's hold off on that. But everybody understands that we have taken a tough stance on crime, and we've created a bill of rights for victims. We have to be concerned about victims. I just attended yesterday an announcement at Baycrest with Mrs. Lorraine Harper, where we're focusing on the issue of fraud, particularly directed against seniors, and they tend to be the most vulnerable and the victims of most financial fraud. I've had a lot of experience at the Investment Dealers Association, at the Ontario Securities Commission, and then of course I've met with the head of the RCMP, with CSIS, with the Border Services Agency. We have to deal with this issue, and the initiative that was announced yesterday will help protect seniors against
Roger,
fraud.
are we going to be speaking separately about terrorism? Because
we will. We'll do that as our next question. If
I was just going to say, I mean, speaking of fraud, are we going to have a chance to talk about the Senate?
Okay. Well, how about we'll start with our international, with terrorism and Canada's stand on terrorism and just our presence on the international stage when it comes to that. And where would you take us when it comes to the international stage? And we'll start, I believe, with Marco, right?
Well, look, there is no doubt that there are parts of the world which are very unstable, and the Liberal government has a track record of contributing where and when called upon with the appropriate commitments. When it comes to terrorism, I am the only candidate in the country that is running for federal public office that has actually prosecuted domestic terrorism. I have firsthand experience about it. I prosecuted the Toronto 18, which involved a group of individuals who had self-radicalized based on a toxic ideology of hatred for members of this community, hatred for all of Canada, hatred for our way of life. This is not acceptable. This is not consistent with the values of Canadians. And a Liberal government is going to meet that threat head on. I can look you in the eye and tell you that. There is nothing that either Joe or Andrew or anybody can say that is going to waver our resolve to keep Canadians safe when it comes to terrorism.
Marco, we'll stop you there. Rudy?
Terrorism is a horrible problem in our world because of there is evil in the world, and we must do something to eradicate it, to get rid of it. And any way that the government can devise to do this is acceptable. And keeping in mind that we still would like to eventually have a sustainable and compassionate world.
Okay, Rudy, thank you very much. Joe?
Well, look, we know that the international jihadist movement has declared war on Canada and the shared values of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. They've murdered, they've raped, they've beheaded, they've tortured, they've sold into slavery young girls. We can't sit on the sidelines. We have to make sure that Canadians are protected at home and that we join in the international coalition to degrade ISIS. Unfortunately, my two colleagues represent parties that would have us raise the white flag of surrender, withdraw from the mission, abandon our allies. Can you imagine how they would feel about that? Well, you do the heavy lifting. We're going home.
Okay, Joe,
you know, the responsibility.
We're going to have to stop you there. It's just that was the opening question, but you'll have a chance to reply.
Sure.
Andrew, you have 30
well, let's
seconds.
Deconstruct a bit of what Joe has said here. Other countries doing the heavy lifting? Absolutely, they're doing the heavy lifting. Canada's participated in less than 3% of the sorties in this region. It's done so because the Conservatives have been absolutely incompetent, as the Liberals were beforehand, in making sure our defence forces are actually capable of participating on the front line. The Conservatives have pulled back from peacekeeping, which is an absolutely critical role Canada used to perform. Those are the pieces that we should be restating in terms of Canada's role. We should make sure we've got a good defence force. We should make sure that we've got a peacekeeping operation. We should make sure we've got a reputation as Canadians of actually participating with our neighbours.
Okay, thank you very much. Marco, would you like to
Again, interesting talk coming from Andrew on the terrorism file, given that his party didn't support the original anti-terrorism legislation that would have allowed us to prevent and prosecute the individuals like the Toronto 18. I think it's again, a very curious set of talking points, but not backed up by any actual principled support for the type of legislation that I just mentioned. And with respect to you, Joe, and the Conservative Party's position on ISIL, you have an obligation when you are going to ask Canadians to make the ultimate sacrifice to be upfront with the public about what the nature of the mission is. So don't come to Parliament and ask for opposition support unless you're going to be transparent. And then when they go there and they do the heavy lifting, to use your phrase, they come back. And how do you treat them? How do you treat our veterans? You treat them as though they are just discarded second-class citizens. I don't think that's fair. The Liberal Party is going to treat veterans with respect and with dignity. We're going to give them the support that they need after having served in a very, very difficult armed conflict zone.
I find it fascinating.
Andrew, we'll let Joe respond to that.
It's quite shocking sometimes to hear what comes out of the Liberal Party. You know, after a decade of darkness, we've put unprecedented amounts of funding to our brave men and women in uniform who were asking to go into harm's way to defend the Canadian way of life. We put unprecedented amounts of funding to support our brave veterans. You know, I wonder, given his Mr. Mendicino's experience in prosecution under our government, whether what his view is about his leader, Justin Trudeau's, refusal to, or his opposition of taking away citizenship from a convicted terrorist, one of the Toronto 18. I mean, we believe that someone who has committed an act of terrorism, treason, an act of war against Canada, if they have another citizenship, should not retain Canadian citizenship. Okay. What is your position on that?
My
Marco, this will be the last answer, and then we have to move on to closing statements.
Well,
Andrew, I'm sorry.
Have an opportunity to get
Roger.
in. I mean, Marco's had 2 or 3 now, and I think
Roger,
this is
he put the question to me.
It was put to Marco, and we're almost
Andrew,
running out of time.
You can chime in at the discretion of the moderator after my answer. My position is, Joe, is that your boss shouldn't be deciding who is citizen, who gets to keep their citizenship during an election. There's only one reason why this issue is coming up right. Well, sorry, if I might be permitted to finish.
We're going to have to. I'm sorry, we're going to have to cut you off.
There's only
there.
one reason why this issue is coming up.
Gentlemen,
right
I'm
now,
sorry,
Joe,
but we're going to have to cut you off right there and move on to our closing statements.
Canadians know better.
No, it's because.
Okay, Joe, I'm sorry. We have to move on to our closing statements now, and we will start in reverse order. And Rudy Brunell, Solomonovici of the Animal Alliance Environment Voters Party of Canada.
We need a well-educated society to promote the ideals that Animal Alliance Environment Voters has. We need to educate people about health issues and how to live how to live properly within the environment, and to keep our society and our world in a healthy state.
Okay, thank you, Rudy. We're moving on now. Marco Mendicino of the Liberals.
Thank you very much. After 10 years, Canadians are hurting. We've had 2 recessions, rising unemployment. It is time for change. Under Justin Trudeau's vision, we are going to kickstart the economy. And it's not just about policy. This election is about the type of government that you want. Do you want the divide and conquer politics under Stephen Harper? I don't think that the vast majority of Canadians that I've spoken with want that. They want a government that is going to be inclusive, that is going to support the Canadians that need the support, that is going to be a serious and compassionate role player on the international stage, and that is going to bring Canadians together, not divide them. I look forward to earning your privilege to be the next member of Parliament. I'm your neighbour, I'm your friend.
Thank you,
very much.
Moving on to Andrew Thomson. Andrew.
This is a historic election, and it's an opportunity for us to think about what kind of Canada we want. I believe in as I've been out campaigning, I've heard loud and clear that people want a Canada built on mutual respect, not one on fear and loathing as the Conservatives have put forward. They want a Canada where they know if they work hard they can get ahead. We need to make sure that the economy is growing and supporting them as they do that. And they want a Canada that makes sure no one is left behind. We need to make those investments back into our social programs, into childcare, into healthcare, into pharmacare, and into supporting our seniors. That is the choice on the ballot. What kind of Canada do we want today?
Thank you, Andrew Thomson, the NDP, and Joe Oliver, the Conservative.
Yes, you've been treated to a discussion which reveals some stark differences in opinion with important implications for the economy and for Canada's future. We believe that a re-elected government, a re-elected Conservative government, will protect the economy, make life affordable for Canadians, more affordable, and protect Canadians, which is the government's primary responsibility. The way forward for Canada is reliable, experienced leadership, and I very much hope for your support on October 19. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. The debates can be found on rogerstv.com. That's it for the local campaign. I'm Roger Peterson. Thank you for joining us.